Last night's Australian federal budget revealed a tax increase again. And no, you're not going to hear about it on the news because they didn't actually increase your tax rate or change the tax brackets because they didn't have to. But believe me when I tell you they allowed a tax increase by stealth to sneak into your paycheck and steal your hard-earned cash because believe it or not, all they have to do is leave the tax rates and tax brackets alone, and your taxes go up by themselves. Confused? All will be explained, I promise. My name is Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help people like you to understand the world as it changes around you. Last night was the Australian federal budget, and well, there were very few surprises, mostly because there's an election coming, and so the government has already leaked almost all of the budget-related information as part of its unofficial re-election campaign. There was one surprise, a small but somewhat meaningful reduction in the lowest tax bracket, which is nice and will offer slight financial relief to workers, but ultimately it is just window dressing, and it was done so the Labor Party could poke fun at the Liberals by claiming that they are now the party of tax cuts. So, what's this I'm saying about a tax rise? Because no tax rise was announced. Well, to make sense of it, first we need to quickly go through how taxes and tax brackets work. In most countries with an income tax, they have what's called a progressive tax system. Now, that means that as you earn more, you'll pay a higher proportion of your income in tax. The easiest way to explain it is actually with a flat tax, which is a fixed percentage that doesn't change no matter how much you earn. If tax is, let's say, 20% as a flat tax, not progressive, then no matter what you earn, you'll pay more in tax because you're being taxed at 20% on more dollars. But as a proportion of your income, it's the same. It's 20%. It's a flat tax rate. A progressive tax rate, on the other hand, means that as you earn more, you don't just pay more because there's more dollars being taxed, but you also move into higher tax brackets where your dollars are being taxed at higher percentages. So the proportion of your income that you pay in tax goes up as you earn more. Now, don't get mad at me. I'm just explaining how it is, not how it should be. As a libertarian, I don't think tax should exist at all, but that's not helpful for understanding the world that we live in right now. So, back to reality. In Australia, we have 5 income tax brackets. Under 18,200, you don't pay any tax at all. For every dollar above that, up to 45,000, you'll pay 16 cents this financial year. But this is the one thing that is changing within this budget, because next year the rate in this bracket will drop to 15 cents in the dollar, and then after that 14. Besides that, nothing else has changed. That's the only change. And yes, it's small, but it will bring some somewhat meaningful tax relief for taxpayers. Now, for every dollar you earn above that 45,000 up to 135, you'll pay 30 cents in the dollar. And you can see as we move up the income ladder, the taxes get higher per dollar as a proportion. Now, I know I'm laboring this point, but this is really important for understanding bracket creep, which is that hidden tax hike that I'm talking about that happens every year when the politicians do nothing. So, above that, there's 2 more brackets, one from 135K to 190K, which is 37 cents in the dollar. And then finally, above 190K, you'll pay 45 cents per dollar that you earn. Okay, so we get it, right? More income leads to more tax, not just in absolute dollar values, but also as a proportion, as a percentage of the dollars that you earn. So, how does all this lead to a stealth tax increase? Well, because of inflation and the pay rises to keep up with inflation. We all know what inflation is. It's basically measuring how your money is losing a bit of its value every year. The Reserve Bank tries to control inflation and keep it to about 2% per year, which sounds low, but it adds up real fast. Now, here's the kicker. We like to get a pay rise every year to keep up with inflation, plus a bit more if we can get it. But we all know that if our pay rise is less than inflation, then even though we did get a pay rise and the number of dollars we're being paid is more than last year, that actually we've taken a pay cut because prices have risen by more than our pay packet did. All right, that's inflation. We know that, right? So, ideally, the pay rise that you get each year will at least match inflation. It will at least keep up with these increases in prices. But, and finally, we come to the point, even in that case where your pay rise equals inflation, you are still worse off because of this stealth tax hike known as bracket creep. You see, that extra money you're getting, that little bit of pay rise, it goes on top of all the money you were already earning, which means that from a tax point of view, all of that new money is in your highest applicable tax bracket for you. Your first 18,000 is tax-free, remember? After that, 16% until above 45,000. When you pay 30% until 135,000, where you're paying 37%, etc. That pay rise that you got, it's going on the top. It's going into your highest tax bracket that applies to you, which means that it's being taxed at your maximum individual income tax rate, which by definition is higher than your average tax percentage across your income. Let me give you an illustration. If you earn $100,000, then your first $18,000 is tax-free. 18 to 45,000 will cost you $4,288 in income tax. Then you've still got another $55,000 in income, which sits in that 30% bracket, which adds up to $16,500. And when you put it all together, your tax bill is $20,788 on your income of $100,000, which works out to be 20.78% of your income. But if you get 3% pay rises for 5 years, just let's say keeping up with inflation, you are now, after those 3% pay rises, at a gross income of $115,927. I'm just going to call it $116,000 to make the math a little easier. Now remember, all you did with those 5 years of pay rises was keep up with inflation. You can't buy any more than you could before. Your living standards are exactly the same as before. The tax brackets, though, well, they haven't changed. So now instead of only having $55,000 in that top 30% tax bracket, you now have $71,000 in that same top 30% tax bracket. So now instead of paying $20,788 per year in income tax, you're paying $25,588. And here's the rub. Instead of your tax bill adding up to just under 21% of your total income across all the tax brackets, it now adds up to more than 22%. That's a full percentage point increase in your actual tax as a percentage of your income. Not because you got a raise and nor because your earnings increased faster than inflation. This is just because your income kept up with inflation and the tax brackets didn't. Governments love it because whilst it doesn't sound like much when we're talking about individuals over a year or two, it is simply astonishing the sums of money when you look over a decade at what it does to the whole economy with millions of income tax payers. Remember, if your average tax rate goes up from 20% to 21%, well, that's a 1% increase in the absolute rate, but that's actually a 5% increase over what you were paying before. Can you imagine the outcry if the government were to try and raise income tax rates by 5% relative to what they are? It would be politically disastrous. But they don't have to risk that backlash to get those tax increases. They just have to do nothing, keep their mouth shut, and bracket creep does their dirty work for them. So, yesterday's budget? Once again, there was no mention of adjusting tax brackets. Once again, the government were perfectly happy to watch on silently as this stealth tax increase sneaks into your paycheck and steals from you right when you are most in need of some genuine cost of living relief. There's so much more to say about the budget and about taxes, but I'm going to leave it there for this video. Bracket creep equals tax increases by stealth. And if the politicians aren't adjusting the tax brackets every single budget, then they are accomplices in the theft. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help people like you to understand the world as it changes around you, or in the case of these tax brackets, as it doesn't change around you. I do this full time now, so please support my work by buying my books and merch from goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Follow all of my work on all of the socials via @TopherField, and YouTube reckons that you're going to love this video of mine too, so maybe stick around and give that a watch. In any case, please like, subscribe, leave me a comment or a question, and I'll see you in the next video.